do when your fave is toxic? I have a theory that people never want to admit when their favorite celebrities are problematic, because that would mean in listening to their music or watching their movies or any other form of art they produce would mean that you endorse their bad behavior. And so most of the time a lot of people use the concept of separating the art from the artist. So in this video I want to find out if this is at all possible, and if it is possible, should we be doing it? And also I want to explore whether or not any of this causes harm to other people. So the first thing I want to talk about is I hate it when I always say the first thing I want to talk about, like we lecture. I am a fool, I can't. So I have a thing. Can I stop saying okay? Can you stop with the okay? So a disclaimer before we start. One, in this video I will be making a lot of examples of celebrities, and if I happen to mention your fave, it doesn't mean that I'm calling for them to be cancelled, or neither am I condemning you for supporting them. I'm just making examples for completeness sake, so do whatever works for you. Secondly, if I use the word allegedly, I don't mean I don't believe the victims. And then lastly, as a trigger warning, I will be talking about sexual assault, homophobia, transphobia, and those kind of things. When I mean art, I mean that the thing that your fave is famous for, whatever that is their art. So whether it's a TV show, music, or books, or movies, or whatever that is what I mean when I talk about art. And also I'll be using the word celebrity or artist interchangeably, but I'm essentially talking about the same thing. So when we first get introduced to celebrities, we first get introduced to their art before we get to know them personally. And what I mean by this is that when you hear a song for the first time without knowing who the artist is, you can at that moment decide whether or not you like their type of music. So having any background knowledge or not having background knowledge about that person has no effect on the quality of their work. The question of whether or not we can separate the art from the artist, I think that we can to a certain extent, but this does depend on certain factors, and one of the factors being whether or not the artist's bad behavior reflects on their work. An example of this is Harvey Weinstein, who is an American producer. He has produced hundreds of movies and like Django, The Upside, Nancy Diaries, and many others. But he's also a terrible person who sexually assaulted many actresses. And when you watch those movies, there's no way for you to know who they were produced by unless you do the research. And because who he is as a person doesn't reflect in his work. Other people may argue that when you watch movies, you don't watch them because of who produced them most of the time. You watch them because of the actors and actresses. So in a point where the producers are the problematic people, you don't necessarily have to like boycott or stop watching certain movies because you're watching them for the actors and actresses. But I don't know. It's different from someone like Bill Cosby, who he was also the actor and like the producer. So it varies from case to case. But what happens when the art is a reflection English. So what happens in a case where the art reflects the artist, like in the case of R. Kelly, because some of his lyrics do have details of the kind of abuse and his obsession that he had with underage girls. So in a case like this, the art is a reflection of who the artist is, and in his case it might be harder for people to try and separate the art from the artist. My next question is, who is problematic and who's not? How do you choose who to support and who to stop supporting? What do you base your decision on continuing to support your problematic fave on? At the end of the day, no one is perfect, and even our favorite celebrities are bound to slip up. They are bound to do or say something that offends us, or sometimes commit crimes. But how do you choose who to stop supporting and who to continue, regardless of what they do? I don't think there's any right or wrong answers to these questions, but I do think there's a couple of questions that we as the fans have to ask ourselves when we make the decisions to continue to support our toxic faves. For the most part, I don't think supporting the art of an artist who has been dead for a while has any major consequences because they themselves don't benefit from your support. However, a lot of the time when artists passed away, fans always want to erase the bad things that I've done and never want people to bring it up. An example of this is with Michael Jackson. We know Michael Jackson is undeniably one of the greatest artists of our time, but he was also accused of sexual assault of at least four young boys in the early 90s, and these accusations were so serious that he went on trial for them. And even though there were multiple police arrests, investigations, and lawsuits, Michael denied these allegations right until he passed away in 2009, and he was also never um, arrested. Was never found guilty. In 2019, a documentary called Leaving Neverland was released, and in this documentary, two of Michael's alleged victims talk about their experiences with him. And so, when fans of Michael Jackson want us to forget this part of his biography, they are trying to invalidate the feelings of the victims that went through those experiences with Michael. And so, I think this causes harm because as much as they want us to forget anything bad about him, his victims are living with that trauma every day. And so this is the issue I have with people who talk about not speaking ill of the dead. But my point is, if the artist has passed away, I don't think it does cause any harm, but we shouldn't try to silence their living victims simply by saying that we should not speak ill of the dead. But for the majority of us, our toxic faves are still alive and they still benefit from us buying their merch, listening to their music, watching their shows, or going to their shows, or whatever it may be. So how are we then supposed to interact with their art now without seeming like we endorse their behaviors? One of the first questions you should ask yourself is if the person has received punishment for their behavior, and also if the person has expressed remorse for the things that they have done and said. But this is often a futile request because by virtue of the person being a celebrity, they are already in a position of power and privilege, and most of the time they will get away with it. But on the off chance that they don't get away with it, how are we then supposed to interact with their art post rehabilitation? So an example of this is with Jub-Jub. So in 2010, Jub-Jub and his friend Temba Chabalala were drag racing, and they crashed into a group of young boys, an accident which then left four of the boys dead and two with critical injuries. So initially they were sentenced to 25 years in jail, and then the sentence was reduced to 8, and then they ended up serving 4 of those years and were released in 2017. Now fast forward to 2021, Jub-Jub is a presenter on Uyajola 99, and it's one of the biggest shows in the country. And every Sunday when it plays, it will definitely be in the top trending list on social media. Now, every time it trends, one or two people will always bring up his past. So his fans and fans of the show will obviously come to his defense, and a lot of the time when they do defend him, they'll talk about the fact that he did go to jail and he did receive his penalty. So people should forget it and move on. While I understand why people would be annoyed by that and why the fans will have that reaction, but the fans aren't the people who are affected by the bad behavior. They aren't the people who are left only to imagine what their children could have grown up to be. They weren't on the receiving end of the bad behavior. And so for people to dismiss serious issues like that can be a little bit harmful. But personally, I don't think constantly bringing up the his past benefits anyone. I don't think there's any way for Jub-Jub that I don't think there's any way that Jub-Jub will ever forget what happened that day. There's no matter how many times he asks for forgiveness, no matter how many times he does charity work, no matter how many times, no matter how successful he becomes, even he can never forget what happened that day. So he will always have this hanging over his head, and unfortunately, that's the price that he's got to pay. But just because he's apologizing, just because he's donated money to the families, it doesn't mean people have to forgive him. It doesn't mean the families have to forgive him. And it's not the fans' jobs or the public's job to redeem him. All he can do is constantly work on improving himself and prove that he has learned from his past mistakes. And whether or not people forgive him is something that's out of his control, and fans shouldn't use blanket statements like forgive him and move on just because he went to jail for that. Another person who's never been able to move on from his past is Chris Brown. So Chris Brown assaulted Rihanna in 2009, and he took a plea deal, and he did community service and did some anger management classes and whatnot. But they reunited in 2012, and they dated for some time before breaking up again in 2013. So what's interesting about his issue, even though Rihanna has publicly stated that she forgave him, and I often feel like her fans seem to never want to let her forget it. In 2019, Rihanna posted a IG video of her promoting her Fenty Beauty, I think it was lipsticks or glosses. But in the video, a Chris Brown song is playing in the background, and in the comment section, her fans were going off. They were losing their minds. And so I find that situation quite confusing, because if the person who was directly affected by the assault and the person who was directly affected by the bad behavior has chosen to move on and even be able to go as far as being able to continue to support and listen to Chris Brown's music, what grounds do I then, as the fan, have to tell her that she can't do that? And this is also another point where I think fandoms and stans and fans can sometimes be toxic, because her fans are so determined to never let Chris Brown forget what he did. They're simultaneously not letting Rihanna forget what happened to her. So when you think back to that IG video, it's a video promoting Fenty Beauty, one of her greatest achievements and a billion-dollar business that she's worked hard to build. But the moment the fans started commenting about the song in the background, it stopped being about Rihanna, the ambitious businesswoman, and it immediately became about Rihanna, the assault victim. And in that moment, they reduced her to something that happened to her and not who she is. Why do her fans or people think that they know what happened to her better than she does? Why are they trying to control how she should react to something that happened to her? Okay, so some people might argue that they feel betrayed because they had to stop supporting Chris Brown to show solidarity to Rihanna. And I get that, but firstly, it's not about you. And secondly, fans need to learn how to make decisions based on how they feel, and not make decisions based on what they think people expect from them. Because if people cancelled Chris Brown because they don't want to support someone who abuses women, then whatever Rihanna did or whatever she chooses to do shouldn't affect their decision. Next, I want to know, what do we do? What do we do? Next, I want to know, what do we do when our faves refuse to learn from their mistakes? I know that they are our toxic or problematic faves for a reason, but I wonder if there's a limit to the number of things that they can do before we completely stop supporting them, or do we as fans just have to accept that this is who they are and we love them regardless. And I think an example of this are the Kardashian Jenners. Whether you love them or you hate them, Oksala, you know about them. And the Kardashians are no strangers to controversies and drama. And I think that over the years, we have come to not expect anything less from them. But I often wonder if any of their scandals will ever get to a point where they've gone too far that the fans will not continue supporting them. Because so far, we've seen so much from undisclosed ads on Instagram, even though it's a crime, they continue to do it, to Chloe and Kim, who are always pushing the boundaries of cultural appropriation and blackfishing, to tone deaf adverts and taking vacations to escape COVID-19. Also, Kim defending Jeffree Star for racism. Essentially, there's very few problematic things they haven't done. But despite all these things that I've mentioned, people are still always raging about Skims, which is Kim Kardashian's shapewear. People are always looking forward to KKW beauty launches. Kylie Cosmetics always sells out. So therefore, their fans don't see anything wrong with their behavior. They will continue to support them even though their support is the reason why the Kardashian Jenners will never learn from their mistakes. And I think that's the moral dilemma that fans of problematic people have, is that you might think that you don't agree with their behavior, but if you can still support them even when they're being problematic, then fundamentally you don't think that they deserve to face any punishment or consequences for their behavior. Because if you did, you wouldn't be supporting their businesses or listening to their music or watching their shows, because those are the things that keep them in positions of power and influence. And we've seen it repeatedly how celebrities only recognize the severity of their actions once their platforms get taken away from them. We have Chrissy Teigen, who only apologized for being a bully when she started losing sponsorships. The baby only saw his remarks as harmful and wrong when he started being dropped from shows. McG and his team only apologized for their homophobic and transphobic comments once the sponsors started pulling out. And the same can be said about the Fresh and Euphonic and Somizi, who only addressed the very serious allegations against them when they lost their radio and TV gigs. So my point is, we know that our problematic phase often remain problematic until they feel the consequences of their actions. And that only happens when we, the fans, stop supporting them. When the big companies that give them the platforms take them away. So this is why most of the time when we try to separate the art from the artist, we are also contributing to the problem. Like, I also have questions like, if the person we love isn't problematic, but they are associated with someone who's problematic, what do we do? DJ Zinhle, who herself is not problematic, but her best friend is Pearl Tusi. Like in the case of John Legend, who's married to Chrissy. I don't know. Or with someone like, I don't know who else. Many other people were too. Okay. Or with in the case of Nikki, who, first of all, what her husband did and what her brother did are not her fault. She is no way like a part of that to blame. No. But the way that she then defends them in public and the allegations of the harassment and all those things, I think that's problematic coming from her. Plus, she sometimes, like her collaboration with 6ix9ine, that was kind of problematic. She wasn't the person who's problematic, but choosing to do that, what do we say or what do we do in that moment? And we also have the likes of Black Coffee, who's touring and collaborating with the likes of Euphonic. What do we do in these instances? I don't know, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Like, what do you guys do to choose your problematic fave? I think it's interesting to see how people process what is problematic to them and what is not. When I was researching this topic, I went in hoping that I would find logical explanations on how to still watch the movies I like and still read the books that I like or listening to the music that I like without seeming like I endorse the behaviors of the people who've created those things. I went in hoping to find a logical explanation on why we love the people that we do. But the truth of the matter is, choosing who to support is not a logical decision, it's an emotional one, because we have emotional attachments to the music we listen to the movies we watch, to the books we've read. And so the idea of having to let them go because they were made by problematic people is difficult. However, I think it's important for us to be able to recognize when celebrities we love are problematic, because when we refuse to confront their flaws, we end up defending bad or harmful behavior. Just like how we love the people in our lives, but we can call them out when they are wrong, we should learn to do the same with celebrities. You don't have to be a part of a celebrity's defense force at any cost. And the decision on who to support and who not to support can only be made by you. And I don't think you have to erase all the memories of how their art made you feel. But I think it is important to be conscious of how the problematic behavior they do affects other people. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think, and also tell me how you choose your problematic fave, or who your problematic fave is if you're brave enough. I'll see you guys in my next video.